The obsidian conclave chamber throbbed with a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the very bones of the assembled dignitaries. Millennia of tradition dictated this solemnity, a silent prelude to decisions that could reshape the fate of the Xylos' hegemony, a civilization that had charted the stars for epochs beyond reckoning. Above the immense crystalline skylight, usually a portal to the swirling nebula that bathed Xylos Prime in ethereal light, was now darkened, displaying only stark sensor readouts, complex algorithms painting a picture of the unknown. All eyes, multifaceted and gleaming with nervous anticipation, were fixed upon the central dais where the Grand Artificer, Kael'thas, stood motionless, his carapace shimmering with an almost imperceptible tremor. Kael'thas, the most revered scientist and strategist of the hegemony, finally broke the silence, his voice a synthesized baritone that echoed through the chamber, each syllable carrying the weight of generations. The anomaly persists. Its trajectory remains unpredictable. The word hung in the air, a chilling admission of the limits of Xylosian understanding, a concept that was anathema to their meticulously ordered worldview. For centuries, the hegemony had prided itself on its mastery of the cosmos, its ability to predict and control the myriad forces that governed the universe. Now, something had appeared that defied their every calculation, a ghost in their perfectly crafted machine. Unpredictable! The word was spat out by Councillor Zalera, a political heavyweight whose influence rivaled that of the Grand Artificer himself. Her multifaceted eyes narrowed, glinting with suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. Surely, Grand Artificer, you jest. We are the Xylos. We unravel the secrets of quasars and harness the power of dying stars. What could possibly elude our comprehension? Zalera's voice was a honed weapon, designed to intimidate and control, and it had served her well in the intricate dance of hegemonic politics. But even she could not entirely mask the unease that gnawed at the edges of her certainty. Kael'thas turned slowly, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the flickering light of the data streams. Councillor Zalera, I assure you I do not jest. This is not a rogue asteroid or a stray comet. This entity exhibits properties that defy our current understanding of physics. Its propulsion system is unlike anything we have encountered, its energy signature fluctuates wildly, and its very composition seems to shift and adapt. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. Furthermore, it originates from a sector of the galaxy previously designated as uninhabitable, a region devoid of resources and riddled with gravitational anomalies. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Inhabitable. The word implied something far more unsettling than mere technological advancement. It suggested a defiance of natural laws, an ability to thrive in an environment that should have been inherently lethal. It hinted at a level of resilience that the Xylos, with their meticulously curated environments and carefully calibrated existence, found profoundly disturbing. And what of its inhabitants? Councillor Vrax, a military strategist known for his pragmatism and ruthlessness, finally spoke, his voice a deep rumble. Have we established contact? Do we know their intentions? Kael'thas hesitated, his carapace darkening slightly, a subtle sign of inner turmoil. We have attempted communication, Councillor. Using all known linguistic protocols, all known mathematical sequences, all known forms of interstellar greetings. We have received no response. Silence descended upon the chamber once more, heavier and more oppressive than before. The absence of a response was far more alarming than any hostile declaration could have been. It suggested an indifference, or perhaps a level of comprehension that rendered Xylosian attempts at communication utterly meaningless. Then we must prepare for the worst, Vrax declared, his voice hardening. If these entities refuse to communicate, we must assume they are hostile. We must mobilize the fleets, fortify our defenses, and be ready to meet them with overwhelming force. Zalera, however, held up a hand, silencing Vrax with a glacial stare. Patience, Councillor. Hasty actions could provoke a conflict that might otherwise be avoided. We must proceed with caution, with prudence. We must understand our enemy before we engage them. She turned back to Kael'thas. Grand Artificer, what more can you tell us about these entities, their capabilities, their weaknesses, their motivations? Kael'thas sighed, a sound that resonated deep within his carapace. That, Councillor, is the crux of the matter. We know almost nothing. Their technology is alien, their behavior is erratic, and their very existence poses a fundamental challenge to our understanding of the universe. He paused, his multifaceted eyes gazing out into the darkened skylight, as if searching for answers in the swirling cosmic dust. But one thing is certain. They are different, unlike anything we have ever encountered. On the other side of the galaxy, far removed from the obsidian conclave chamber and the anxieties of the Xylos' hegemony, aboard the exploratory vessel Dauntless, Captain Eva Rostova stared out at the swirling nebulae with a mixture of awe and profound weariness. The mission had been dragging on for years, stretching the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. They were supposed to be charting unexplored sectors, searching for resources, and perhaps, just perhaps, making contact with other intelligent life. Instead, they had found nothing but empty space, cosmic dust, and the gnawing feeling that they were utterly alone in the universe. "Anything, Lieutenant?" Rostova asked, her voice raspy from recycled air and countless hours spent staring at sensor displays. Lieutenant Commander Jian Li, her second-in-command, shook his head, his face etched with frustration. "Negative, Captain. Still nothing but background radiation and gravitational anomalies. This sector is a dead zone," Rostova sighed. "I know, Jian, I know, but we have to keep looking. Command is counting on us to find something, anything, to justify this expedition." Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm blared through the ship, jolting everyone to attention. Li's fingers flew across the console, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Captain, we've got a contact. Unidentified vessel approaching at high speed." Rostova's weariness vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. "On screen, magnify." The image on the main view screen shimmered, then resolved into a bizarre, multifaceted construct of shimmering metal and pulsating energy. It was unlike anything Rostova had ever seen, defying all conventional notions of spacecraft design. It was alien. Truly, profoundly alien. "Hail them," Rostova ordered, her voice calm despite the frantic pounding of her heart. "Open a universal translator channel and broadcast a standard greeting." Li nodded and executed the command. The Dauntless sent out a burst of radio waves, a carefully crafted message designed to convey peaceful intentions and a desire for communication. Silence. The alien vessel continued its approach, its movements erratic and unpredictable. "They're not responding, Captain," Li reported, his voice strained. "They're not even acknowledging our presence." Rostova frowned. "Keep trying, Jian. Maybe they don't understand our signals. Try different frequencies, different protocols, and arm the defense systems, just in case." The minutes stretched into an eternity as the alien vessel drew closer. Still no response. Rostova's initial excitement began to give way to a growing sense of unease. What did these aliens want? Why were they ignoring her attempts at communication? Were they hostile, or were they simply unaware? Finally, as the alien vessel came within visual range, it abruptly stopped, hovering motionless in the void. Then a single, powerful beam of energy lanced out from the vessel, striking the Dauntless directly. "Shields failing," Li shouted, his face pale. "We're taking heavy damage." Rostova gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white. This wasn't a first contact. This was an attack. "Return fire," she ordered, her voice filled with grim determination. "Engage evasive maneuvers, and tell me what the hell that weapon was." The Dauntless shuddered as its weapon systems came online, unleashing a barrage of lasers and plasma bolts at the alien vessel. The battle had begun. But as Rostova watched the alien vessel effortlessly deflect her ship's attacks, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were hopelessly outmatched. They had stumbled into something far beyond their comprehension, a conflict that could have devastating consequences for humanity. Back on Xylos Prime, the Obsidian Conclave chamber was in chaos. Sensor readings were spiking wildly, reports of escalating energy signatures flooding the data streams. The silence was broken by a cacophony of alarmed voices, urgent commands, and the frantic beeping of consoles. "Grand Artificer, what is happening?" Zalera demanded, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to maintain composure. "Why is the anomaly engaging in hostile action?" Kael'thas stared at the chaotic display, his multifaceted eyes narrowed in concentration. I do not know, Counselor. Their behavior is illogical. They are attacking a vessel that poses no threat to them." "Perhaps it is a preemptive strike," Vrax suggested, his voice grim. "Perhaps they believe we are a threat to them. But why?" Zalera countered, her voice rising in frustration. "We have not provoked them. We have not even approached them. What could possibly motivate such aggression?" Kael'thas shook his head. "I cannot explain it, Counselor, but I fear we have underestimated them. Their technology is more advanced than we initially believed. Their intentions are unclear, and their capacity for violence is undeniable." Suddenly, a new signal appeared on the screens, a faint but persistent transmission emanating from the direction of the conflict. Kael'thas focused on the signal, his multifaceted eyes widening in surprise. "Wait, I'm detecting a linguistic pattern. It is rudimentary, but it is a language." He quickly ran the signal through the hegemony's vast linguistic database, searching for a match. After a moment, the computer returned a result. The language is Terran, from the planet known as Earth. A collective gasp filled the chamber. Earth, the cradle of humanity, a primitive species that had only recently begun to venture into the stars. What were they doing here in this remote and dangerous sector of the galaxy? And why were they engaged in a conflict with an entity that defied all known laws of physics? This changes everything, Zalera murmured, her mind racing. If these entities are attacking humanity, then we have a moral obligation to intervene. Vrax, however, remained skeptical. Moral obligation. Counselor, we are the Xylo's hegemony. We have no obligations to primitive species. Our priority is the security of our own civilization. But if these entities pose a threat to humanity, they may also pose a threat to us, Zalera argued, her voice hardening. We cannot afford to ignore this situation. We must act, and we must act decisively. She turned back to Kael'thas. Grand Artificer, can you determine the extent of the damage to the Terran vessel? Can you ascertain the nature of the alien entity's attacks? Kael'thas nodded. I will do what I can, Counselor, but I cannot guarantee that we will have all the answers. This situation is unprecedented. As the Xylo's hegemony scrambled to understand the unfolding crisis, the battle between the Dauntless and the alien vessel raged on. Rostova and her crew fought valiantly, but they were hopelessly outmatched. The alien vessel's energy weapon tore through their shields and armor with ease, crippling their systems and decimating their ranks. Captain, we're losing life support, Lee shouted, his voice barely audible over the alarms. We have to abandon ship. Rostova knew that he was right. Staying on board would be a death sentence. But abandoning ship meant venturing into the unknown, into the hostile environment of this alien sector. It was a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. Prepare the escape pods, Rostova ordered, her voice filled with grim determination. And send out a distress signal. Maybe, just maybe, someone will hear us. As the escape pods were launched, carrying the survivors of the Dauntless into the void, Rostova looked back at her ship, watching as it was slowly torn apart by the alien vessel's relentless attacks. She felt a pang of grief, a sense of loss that went beyond the destruction of a ship. She had lost her crew, her mission, and perhaps even her faith in the future of humanity. But as she floated in the darkness, surrounded by the wreckage of her ship, she also felt a flicker of hope. They had survived. They had defied the odds, and they had sent out a message, a desperate plea for help that might just reach someone who cared. Aboard the Zalosian flagship, Indomitable, Admiral Thrax received the analysis of the Terran distress signal. The raw desperation encoded within the primitive transmission resonated even with his hardened sensibilities. He had seen countless battles, witnessed the destruction of entire worlds, but there was something uniquely poignant about this plea for help, something that touched a chord deep within his ancient soul. The Terran vessel is destroyed, his tactical officer reported, his voice devoid of emotion. The survivors are adrift in escape pods. Their life support systems are failing. Thrax felt a surge of anger directed not at the Terrans, but at the alien entity that had attacked them without provocation. Such wanton destruction was an affront to the very principles of the hegemony, a violation of the delicate balance of the cosmos. Prepare a rescue team, Thrax ordered, his voice cold and resolute. We will recover the Terran survivors and bring them aboard the Indomitable. And then we will deal with this alien menace. The Zalosian rescue team arrived just in time, pulling the Terran survivors from their failing escape pods. Rostova and her crew were brought aboard the Indomitable, where they were given medical attention and provided with food and shelter. As she recovered from her ordeal, Rostova was summoned to meet with Admiral Thrax. She entered his command center, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The room was vast and imposing, filled with advanced technology and staffed by emotionless Zalosian officers. Thrax stood at the far end of the room, his carapace gleaming in the soft light. He was a towering figure, his presence radiating power and authority. Captain Rostova, he said, his voice a deep rumble. I am Admiral Thrax of the Xylo's hegemony. We received your distress signal and came to your rescue. Rostova bowed her head in gratitude. Thank you, Admiral. We are in your debt. Tell me what happened, Thrax said, his voice sharp and demanding. Tell me about the alien vessel that attacked you. Rostova hesitated, unsure of how to explain the inexplicable. It was unlike anything we had ever seen, Admiral. Its technology was far superior to ours. Its behavior was erratic. It attacked us without provocation, and it showed no mercy. Thrax nodded slowly. We have been monitoring this entity for some time. We know little about it, but we know that it is dangerous. It poses a threat not only to your species, but to the entire galaxy. Then why haven't you done anything about it? Rostova asked, her voice filled with frustration. Why did you wait until we were attacked to intervene? Thrax sighed. The situation is complicated, Captain. We are a peaceful civilization. We prefer diplomacy to violence. But this entity, it is not amenable to diplomacy. It does not respond to our attempts at communication. It seems to exist outside the realm of reason. He paused, his multifaceted eyes gazing at Rostova with a strange intensity. But you have something that we do not. You have experience. You have faced this entity and survived. You may hold the key to understanding it, to defeating it. Rostova stared at Thrax in disbelief. He was asking her, a mere human captain, to help him defeat an entity that had baffled the Xylos' hegemony for centuries. It was an impossible task. But as she looked into Thrax's ancient eyes, she saw a glimmer of hope, a desperate plea for help that she could not ignore. "What do you want me to do?" Rostova asked, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "Tell me what I can do to help." Thrax smiled, a rare and unsettling expression. "We have a plan, Captain, a plan that may seem unorthodox, but it is our only chance. We are going to lure the entity into a trap, and we need your help to set it." The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. The Xylos' hegemony would bait the alien entity with a false signal, drawing it towards a strategically located nebula where they would unleash the full force of their fleet. Rostova and her surviving crew would play a crucial role in the operation, acting as bait and providing valuable intelligence on the entity's behavior and capabilities. Rostova knew that the plan was incredibly risky. They were essentially offering themselves up as sacrifices, hoping to lure the entity into a trap that might not even work. But she also knew that it was their only chance to stop the alien menace, to protect humanity and the rest of the galaxy from its destructive power. As the Xylosian fleet prepared for battle, Rostova spent her time studying the data collected from her encounter with the alien entity. She analyzed its energy signatures, its movement patterns, and its weapon systems. She tried to find a weakness, a vulnerability that they could exploit. And then she found something, a subtle anomaly in the entity's energy field, a flicker of instability that suggested a possible point of failure. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead she had. When the alien entity finally arrived, it was even more terrifying than Rostova remembered. Its multifaceted form shimmered with raw power, its energy weapon crackling with destructive potential. The Xylosian fleet opened fire, unleashing a barrage of energy bolts and plasma torpedoes. But the entity effortlessly deflected the attacks, its shields shimmering and adapting to the incoming fire. It was like trying to fight a ghost, an invincible force of nature that could not be harmed. As the battle raged on, Rostova watched the entity's movements, searching for the right moment to strike. She knew that they only had one chance. If they failed, they would all be destroyed. Finally, she saw it. The subtle flicker in the entity's energy field, the brief moment of vulnerability that she had been waiting for. "Now!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the command center. "Fire the quantum disruptor, target that anomaly." The quantum disruptor was an experimental weapon, a last-ditch effort to destabilize the entity's energy field. It was a risky weapon, potentially as dangerous to the user as it was to the target. But Rostova was willing to take the risk. The quantum disruptor fired, sending a concentrated beam of energy towards the entity's vulnerable spot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entity began to shudder, its form flickering and distorting. Its energy weapon sputtered and died. The entity was vulnerable. The Xylosian fleet seized the opportunity, unleashing a concentrated barrage of fire at the weakened entity. Its shields collapsed, its armor shattered, and its very essence began to unravel. Finally, with a blinding flash of light, the entity was destroyed. The battle was over. As the dust settled, Rostova stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring out at the wreckage of the alien entity. She felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, but also a sense of triumph. They had done it. They had defeated the seemingly invincible foe. Thrax approached her, his face etched with relief. "You did it, Captain Rostova," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You saved us all." Rostova smiled weakly. "We did it together, Admiral. It was a team effort." But as she looked out at the stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had defeated one alien entity, but who knew what else was lurking out there, waiting to threaten humanity and the rest of the galaxy. In the aftermath of the battle, as the Xylos' hegemony and humanity began to forge a closer alliance, a startling discovery was made amidst the wreckage of the destroyed entity. It wasn't merely a vessel, but a sophisticated probe, a single component of a much larger network. And within its memory banks they found a message. Not a message of war, not a declaration of conquest, but a beacon, a signal sent out across the vastness of space, reaching back to its creators. A signal that spoke of a looming threat, a cosmic entity of unimaginable power that was slowly consuming the galaxy. The message revealed that the destroyed entity was not an aggressor, but a scout, sent out to warn other civilizations of the impending danger. It had attacked the Dauntless not out of malice, but out of a desperate attempt to gather information, to understand the nature of the threat and find a way to combat it. The Xylos and humanity were not enemies. They were allies, united by a common enemy. As they delved deeper into the message, they discovered that the entity that sent it was an ancient civilization, far older and more advanced than either the Xylos or humanity. They called themselves the Architects, and they had once been the guardians of the galaxy, protecting it from the cosmic entity that now threatened to consume it. But they had failed. They had been overwhelmed, their civilization shattered, and their knowledge lost to the ages. All that remained was this desperate message, a plea for help sent out across the stars. The discovery of the Architect's message sent shockwaves through both the Xylos' hegemony and humanity. It was a revelation that shattered their understanding of the universe, forcing them to confront a threat that was far greater than anything they had ever imagined. The cosmic entity was known only as the Devourer, and it was a force of unimaginable destruction. It consumed entire galaxies, leaving nothing but empty space and cosmic dust in its wake. Its motives were unknown, its methods incomprehensible. It was simply a force of annihilation, driven by an insatiable hunger. The Xylos and humanity knew that they had to act. They had to unite to pool their resources and their knowledge to find a way to stop the Devourer before it consumed the entire galaxy. They embarked on a desperate quest, searching for the lost knowledge of the Architects, hoping to find a weapon, a strategy, anything that could give them a chance against the Devourer. They explored ancient ruins, deciphered cryptic texts, and consulted with the wisest minds in their civilizations. And finally, they found something. A hidden chamber buried deep within an ancient architect city, containing a device of unimaginable power. It was a weapon, a failsafe, designed to disrupt the Devourer's energy field and shatter its form. But the weapon was incomplete. It required a key, a specific frequency of energy that was lost to time, and without that key the weapon was useless. Rostova, however, remembered the subtle anomaly she had detected in the destroyed probe's energy field. It was a faint flicker of instability, a possible point of failure, and she realized that it might also be the key to unlocking the weapon. She worked tirelessly with the Zalosian scientists, analyzing the anomaly, trying to replicate its frequency. And finally, after months of painstaking research, they succeeded. They had found the key. The weapon was activated, unleashing a wave of energy that rippled across the galaxy. The Devourer, sensing the threat, turned its attention towards the Xylos and humanity. The final battle was joined. The Xylosian and human fleets engaged the Devourer, unleashing the full force of their combined firepower. But the Devourer was a force of nature, its power seemingly limitless. It shrugged off their attacks, its form shimmering and adapting to the incoming fire. As the battle raged on, Rostova piloted a small vessel towards the heart of the Devourer, carrying the weapon's activation key. She knew that it was a suicide mission, but she was willing to sacrifice herself to save the galaxy. She reached the Devourer's core, and with a deep breath, she activated the key. The weapon fired, unleashing a wave of energy that struck the Devourer directly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Devourer began to shudder, its form flickering and distorting. Its energy field collapsed, and its very essence began to unravel. With a blinding flash of light, the Devourer was destroyed. The battle was over. The galaxy was safe. But as the light faded, Rostova felt a strange sensation, a sense of connection to something vast and ancient. She saw visions of the Architects, their civilization at its height, their struggles against the Devourer. And then she understood. The Architects were not just an ancient civilization. They were something more. They were the first humans. They had evolved on a distant planet millions of years ago. They had mastered technology and explored the stars. They had become the guardians of the galaxy, protecting it from the forces of destruction. But they had failed. They had been overwhelmed by the Devourer, their civilization shattered, and their memories lost to time. But their legacy lived on. In the Xylos and humanity, in all the civilizations that had risen and fallen throughout the ages. They were all children of the Architects, carrying their genes and their memories within them. Rostova realized that humanity was not a young and insignificant species. They were the descendants of an ancient and powerful civilization, the inheritors of a great legacy. They were the Architects reborn. As she drifted in the wreckage of the Devourer, Rostova felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. She had saved the galaxy, not just for humanity, but for all the children of the Architects. She had fulfilled her destiny. And as she closed her eyes for the final time, she knew that the legacy of the Architects would live on, guiding humanity and the Xylos towards a brighter future. A future where they would stand together as guardians of the galaxy, protecting it from the forces of destruction. They were the ancient ones, and the galaxy had finally seen it coming. The long-lost spark of humanity reignited across millennia. The future forever changed.